being immersed in the craft in jam sessions was like our own personal artist development dojo. And that's when I realized that this is going to be a part of my life in some form or fashion, probably for the rest of my life. I was very small and I had a record player. It was orange with like a multicolor top, and you could lift it up and play vinyl records. I used to play my mom's records, and I remember she had old records like The Dramatics, The Last Poets, Peter Tosh, Gil Scott-Heron, and that's when I realized I was in love with music and in the spoken voice. I would listen to Martin Luther King speeches, and my grandma would be very entertained that this little girl is sitting there listening to a Martin Luther King speech. My grandmother had like the Martin Luther King albums, and then Oscar Brown Jr., who was a storyteller, who would speak to music, this really cool stuff. And even though I was very young, they would let me play the records. And that is the age that if I were, 9 years old now, in that apartment right now, that would have been the age I determined I was gonna be a DJ. And the more I talked to other people about it, I realized that I found my personal song at a very young age. My main motivation for doing it was to not have any regret. And so I've lived my life according to that, even if it meant failure, even if it meant taking a risk. I had tried to leave it alone, but I couldn't. It just kept pulling me back. And so I decided I wanted to be an artist, and I wanted to do work with hip hop, and that I wanted to make a difference in the world and make the world a better place. At the time, I didn't realize that I was affirming that I would be a hip hop artist and a social entrepreneur. I didn't realize that that would then later to me becoming an ambassador, and that would become such a huge part of my brand. When we move with deliberate intention and purpose, our destiny, it meets us. We don't have to chase a thing. And the Freestyle Union Cypher workshop, which is what became the essence and core of who I am, the Cypher, started because I just wanted to be a better freestyler, improviser myself. And then I saw how it impacted others, so then I wanted to share that with other people. I started Freestyle Union Cypher workshop, and then a lot of the artists, everybody in the collective was incredibly talented. Being immersed in the craft in jam sessions was like our own personal artist development dojo. And that's when I realized that this is gonna be a part of my life in some form or fashion, probably for the rest of my life. The Cypher, which is about a communal experience and bringing people together, right? Creating this platform for everybody, making sure that everyone gets something out of it to grow themselves, right? Then there's that other space of telling the truth all the damn time. For me, when I started, I was as an oversharer, overgiver, I started to do too much. And so as I went into realizing I am burning out, I am not well, I started to incorporate that into what it is that I was sharing. And on my healing journey, I started to do a lot of meditation. I started to listen to a lot of wellness audio. And then somehow I ended up recording meditations and me talking. And then somewhere in there, I worked with different creative partners, and it turned into hip hop meditations, which at first sounded silly because people would say, well, how is hip hop and meditation, how are they gonna go together? How does that work? But through the experimentation, we figured out ways for it to work. So there were the male-female gender dynamics, the power, issues of power. So there were the two things happening. One, having certain pure ideals and values, and finding it challenging to find people in the industry that shared my values. And then the other part of it is being a woman doing what I do. I think my naivete around why it's important to know the business caused a lot of suffering for me, and hindered my progress and my vision. My idealism around wanting to include everybody and not wanting to be selfish hurt me artistically, professionally, and financially. The competition that happens, the jealousy, the envy, all that artist stuff, the industry, the business side of people who want to exploit you, want to use you, or then don't want to work with you when they realize they can't exploit you. You know, we're living in a time where people are telling the truth about their stories. Women are speaking up and about their experiences as women with regard to sexual harassment, sexual assault and abuse. It can be very challenging for women to rise up when there's a boys club that they'll never be able to belong to. And it's something that's still difficult for us to discuss. My experiences sound like just naive, you know, because I am vocal, because I have a strong voice. There was a point in time I didn't realize how that would block me from opportunity. We did a showcase, this is years ago, and a guy I knew these guys from college, and they worked in the music industry, and the guy came up, he says, "Wow, you're pretty confident. Do you think you should be that confident? You're pretty confident." So it was like he was annoyed by the fact that we were confident. And for some reason in his mind, he thought it was inappropriate for me to be that confident and on stage. And that same showcase, when it was time for myself and my group to go up, the mics weren't working. And at the time I was like, this is one particular guy who worked in the music industry. I can see his face right now. He sabotaged our mics because when his group went up, they were fine. I had an experience with a friend of mine who I went to talk to him about my project. I had the video footage, the clip. He worked in the business and he said to get advice. So I'm in his space in his office, and then as we're looking at the video, he says, "I didn't realize you had such great cleavage." So I took a deep breath and I said, "Okay." And then I kept talking about the business because I'm like, well, what? This is a smart guy. He's a kind man. He's a friend. So I'm confused. He said, "You actually have talent. So stop this. Like, who's gonna watch the WNBA?" And then when we stood up and I was getting my stuff together, he reaches out and honks my breast with both hands. Yeah, that kind of stuff happens all the time to women. You know, I feel very fortunate that today I'm surrounded by men who affirm, uplift, guide, and advise me. So even as I share those stories, you know, I have I'm in a healthy space with relationship to the nonsense and the negativity. I would say to really decide what are the multiple things you want to do and how are those related, how to connect them. There's a mentor of mine, Ethelbert Miller. He's a poet and a cultural archivist based in Washington, D.C. He ran the African American Resource Center at Howard University for many, many, many years. And one of the things he did, he told me when I was very young, I was doing a lot of different things, and I was interested in theater and directing, and then I was also interested in music, and then I was interested in writing, and I had been almost a poetry apprentice for a very long time of his. And there are other stuff I wanted to do. So he says, "Toni, you need to wash your bowl." And he said, "Have you ever seen those old Kung Fu movies, the Kung Fu flicks?" I was like, "Yeah, I've seen them." He says, "You know, in the movie, and you walk into the compound, and there's some guys over here, they're playing games, they're goofing off, they're being real silly. And then you walk over here to another part of the compound. There's these guys, they're getting high, they're drinking, they're intoxicated. And then you go in the back, right? And you find one or two, and they're practicing their craft. That one guy kicks everybody's ass and saves the day." He says, for the next 12 to 18 months, choose one of these things. Say you want to be a great performer. For the next 18 months, perform everywhere you can. Say no to no opportunity. every single stage, church, wedding, funeral. And then after that, 18 months, and you feel good and you feel confident, then you work on the next piece of your craft. And that's how I built my skills, and that's how I got myself to a certain space. There's never been a time where artists just did one thing. No, people have been triple threats who do science and engineering, who build houses, who do carpentry, who do visual art. This is the nature of what it means to be an artist, is that your brilliance and your creativity enable you to create in multiple different areas of your life. But choose one, two, or three where you're gonna have mastery. Life is a journey, it's not a destination. We keep going, we keep going, we keep going.